when you got offered a job at Lucasfilm and you turned it down because you didn't think you would be able to get the opportunity to tell stories, which is what you really wanted to do. And I'm curious if that's still advice that you would give now, seeing as the landscape has changed and it's harder to get a job now, and if you think maybe you should just take whatever you can get, or if you still think that holds truth to it.
That's a really good question.
Hi, welcome to Art Tale. I'm Sally.
I am Erika.
I'm Ignacio.
I'm Dante.
And I'm Jorge. My name is Jorge Gutierrez. I am a BFA 1997 experimental animation grad and a MFA 2000 experimental animation grad. Let's see, my wife and I had a TV show called El Tigre on Nickelodeon. Then I wrote and directed a movie called The Book of Life with Guillermo del Toro as my producer. Most recently I did a TV show called Maya and the Three on Netflix. And then I just did the opening to The Simpsons for the Halloween episode. Oh. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for being here. We are a group of character animation students here at CalArts, and we're super excited to dive right into this conversation.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So, Jorge,
Yes.
as a director, when you look at students' films that come out of CalArts or other art schools, what do you wish to see from student films, and what do you look forward to when you watch them?
Well, the issue I have with student films is they're supposed to say so many things, right? Because they represent the director, they represent the student, they represent everything about them. But it's really hard to put all that in a short. With attention spans becoming smaller and smaller, watching a long student film is really hard because there's just volume, right? There's so many. So the ones I like are the ones that capture you instantly, the ones that are short. If you can make me smile and tug at my heart, you have me. And telling a joke is easy, making people feel is easy, but making people laugh and making people feel, to me, that's the holy grail. If you can do something that doesn't have any dialogue, it's universal. If you can do something that is from where you're from and also allows you to showcase where you're from. The other thing that I would really encourage you guys is keep them really short, because though it can exist on all the social media platforms way easier. And if you're short, in my day, we didn't have social media, but if you're short today can generate an audience, you are already there. Like, you found an audience. And the issue with the shorts is when people are hiring you, a lot of the times they go, well, we're looking for a board artist. Is the boarding good in the short? We're looking for an animator. Is the animation really good on the short? So you're kind of showcasing a lot of your talent, but you should emphasize the thing that you're really passionate about in your short. So if your short is, I don't know, really beautiful, but it doesn't move well, or it moves just enough to tell the story, and you want to be an animator, then you are not helping yourself. If you want to be a storyboard artist and your short is one shot and it's just a contained space, again, you're not helping yourself. So this short has to do all those things I just said and be a tool for you to get a job. Because becoming a director right out of school is really hard unless you pitch something inspired by that short, or the short is a way to showcase how you're a director. And so it's got a lot of stuff. But I always say, your student short, every hour you put into your student short, it comes back to you 1,000 times. So all the energy, all the effort, all the sleepless nights, all the parties you're not going to, all those things, don't worry. You'll get all that later. You're in school, this is the time.
That's great to hear. And I'd like to talk about something that I've heard you talk about before, which is falling in love with the process of making something in animation rather than the result, because if you fall in love with the process, you'll constantly be rewarded, whereas if you fall in love with the result, then you won't be rewarded nearly as much. But I'm wondering, for someone who's struggling with that, like, is there a way that maybe you can train yourself to fall in love with the process more, or is there a strategy that you do to when you're sort of losing sight of that love that you have for the process?
These questions are so good. I will tell you, so I have ADHD and I'm autistic. And one of the things that has really flourished for me is because I work on so many things, I never get bored. So I literally work on something, I get disinterested, I jump on the next thing, I jump on the next thing. I'm working on 7 things right now. And I'm always working on multiple things all the time. And what you start finding is that when you go away from a thing and you work on something else, you solve things from the other one because you're not consciously thinking about it. So when I was in school, one of the things I did was I tried to do Lego, I called it Lego assignments, where I would go, I'm going to make a short and I'm going to board it in the storyboard class. I'm going to do the designs in the character design class. I'm going to do the backgrounds in the background class so that every assignment I do is a part of something bigger and they don't exist by themselves. And when you start doing that, you start building these blocks and you start making a lot of little shorts. And another thing that I did that I think helped me here was a lot of my classmates would put a lot of emphasis on their short every year had to be the greatest thing they've ever done. And when you took the weight out of that and you said, I'm just gonna do this tiny 20-second thing just to work on color, just to work on editing, just to work on lip sync, just to work on whatever it was. I just did these crappy shorts and I took the value out of making a short. And it wasn't about making my statement every year. It was about, it's just another brick to build a house. And so once you take that weight out of it, then you're kind of free. And these shorts don't define you. It's the body of work that will define you. It's like if someone gives you a portfolio, one drawing doesn't say who you are. It's all the drawings and all the pieces that say who you are. So start taking the value out of those things, because once you take that pressure out, it really frees you. When it comes down to result and process, for me, it was really hard because one of the problems that I'm sure you guys are going to run into is when you come to school, you have taste, right? And your taste is evolving. And a lot of you, like me, see it in your head what you want to do, but your skill level is not there. And the problem with that is there's no cheat to get the skill up. The only cheat, honestly, is just working really hard and doing a ton, right? So the two books that I read here, well, one I read before I came here, but Robert Rodriguez wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew. Chuck Jones wrote Chuck Amok. Chuck Jones said it takes 1,000 drawings to do one good drawing. Robert Rodriguez said it takes 10 student shorts, 10 shitty student shorts to do one good short. And what they're both saying is the same thing, volume, right? The more you do, the better you get. And the reality of that, especially here, is that you guys are the masters of your time. So you get to determine how you spend your time. That's what I was saying earlier on. If you can figure out how to get fast, then you'll have more time to rest, more time to do other things that will inspire you to keep going. If your process is really slow, you have to change your process because you're not going to advance as fast. Being fast is something that will change your life in that you will just do more. And if you do more, you get better. And if you get better, you keep going up. And when you go into the professional world, if you're easy to work with and you're fast, it matters more than talent. If you are really good, but really hard to work with, and it takes you forever, I have bad news. No one's gonna hire you, or they're gonna hire you, and then they're gonna find out, wow, that portfolio piece was amazing, but it took them a week. So volume and speed. Like, treat this like sports. We're all artists. But once you get out of here, you're going into professional teams. And these professional teams expect you to do certain things. And if you're really good at a certain thing, you go to another team and a more paid team, and you keep going up. But it comes down to you. The thing that I used, which is dangerous, and I always warn you guys, the thing that I used was fear. So when I was here, there were two types of students. Students who were pursuing success, right? If I do well, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to get money, I'm going to get the acclaim and the adoration of my peers and blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that's really positive. And then there were students like me, coming from the third world, who were running away from failure, right? So for me, it was, if I don't do well, I'm not going to find a job, and I'm going to have to go back to my country, and in my country, they don't have the stuff that I want to do. I'm going to let down everybody who believed in me. I'm going to let down my parents, my girlfriend, my grandparents, my culture. I will let everybody down. So that pressure could crush you, but it's fuel. So what I found was fear is fuel. This is all dangerous stuff, okay? Fear will always be there. So if you can learn to use the fear to motivate you, then you will never run out of fuel. What's dangerous about that is it can crush you if you think about the fear too much. So learning how to balance those things, it will come down to you and who you are. This is horrible advice that was given to me, but that was true. We had a teacher here who said, and it was shocking when he said it, he said, you guys are being held back by your friends. And everyone in the class was like, what? And he's like, yeah, you guys are navigating towards people like you at the same skill level as you to keep yourself feeling good about your work. You need to cut off those people. You're not here for that. The only person you should be competing with is you. So do not compare yourself with others, compare yourself to yourself. And if you're not getting better, then you're wasting away. And it was really harsh. And I remember I had friends, and I cut them. I cut all those relationships. So it was rough. So this is horrible, but good advice. Again, this is the 90s. This is the 90s. We had teachers here who would burn your assignment in class in front of everybody. Story class, famous teacher Khan.
Safe?
I mean, sure wasn't safe. We had a character design teacher. That was amazing. He would go, I'm only going to talk about the good assignments, and I'm going to pick the worst assignment and destroy that assignment in front of all of you.
Wow.
And if I don't talk about any of your assignments, that means you were that mediocre.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a very different, I mean, a lot of us had, PTSD and therapy afterwards, but it formed that generation like that. Obviously, we didn't know anything about mental health. We didn't know anything about anxiety. Like, why am I crying when I go to sleep every night? So all those things weren't super obvious. But I do think you guys, in the world that you're in here, you get to pick. You get to go, oh my God, what do I do with my time? We didn't have social media. We definitely had video games. And that was at least for me, that was a huge advantage, because when I came here, that was the first thing I cut off. I was like, I'm not going to play video games. All that time, as much as they inspired me and as much as I love them, I'm not getting the return of investment of time that I will get from watching movies and reading books and reading screenplays and reading all these things. Like, video games just didn't give me back what other things gave me. So I was a bastard. I would go to Tijuana and buy, this is PlayStation 2 era, and I would buy the most addictive video games I could find, the bootleg ones. And then I'd come here and I just hand them out.
No way.
And I was like, if you guys can't control yourselves, I will use your lab time. I was the devil. And then same thing, I would go to the parties and I would bring cheap beer from Tijuana, and I would go to the parties, drop off the beer, and be like, I hope everybody gets drunk, and tomorrow everybody's hungover, and I'm gonna use all their lab time. So I was that guy.
That's awesome.
But I think here, the biggest thing that if you're struggling, there's a saying that Picasso has that I've loved, and it's inspiration is real, but it has to find you working.
Oh my.
So even if you're not inspired, get to work and you'll get inspired. If you're not seeing it, get to work and you'll see it. but the default can't be I'll wait till I feel it. Is do it and then feel it.
Yeah.
But just get into that habit. And again, horrible advice, but true. You got to cut off the people who are holding you back. And you guys know who those people are.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna follow up with another question, but
Yeah.
this one it would be more focused on you like leaving your hometown and coming to study here. So basically, while being here, it is difficult to make art because, for example, for me, I feel out of place, and one of the things that mostly fuel my art and my inspiration are my family, and I'm from Mexico, so my country. So how did you approach that? How did you overcome that challenge? Because it's specific to international students.
That's a great question. So, like you, when I got in, the way I got into the school was it really formed my experience forever. I did a portfolio drawing, early 90s. So I called the school and they said, you need figure drawing, you need animation style drawings, and you need a high school diploma. Because I think I was like 15 when I called. And I was like, what's figure drawing? And the guy on the phone was like, naked people. And I was like, I live in Tijuana. I know, there's plenty of naked people places here. I'll go draw there. And then I was like, what's animation drawings? And the guy was like, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, Bart Simpson, stuff like that. So I wrote down like Bugs Bunny, Bart Simpson, Mickey Mouse. And then I was like, I'll figure out how to get my high school diploma. So in Tijuana, I basically went to Casa de la Cultura. I took classes there. All the figure drawing models there are basically exotic dancers. So my drawings look crazy. My parents would be like, where are you going? And I was like, Dad, I draw from life. This is what's in front of me. And then I practiced drawing American drawings. And at the same time, I was already writing stories and doing little comics and painting things I loved about Mexico, right? Day of the Dead and Chupacabras and all the pop, folk, like all the stuff that I loved. But in my brain, those things weren't animation. So my idea was I'll get into the school and then I'll keep doing the stuff I love on the side, but I'll do American animation to get a job. So I applied to the school, came here 17, a year before high school. My plan was I'm gonna cheat, get in a year early. Get rejected a year early, because back then they said it'd take 3 to 4 times to get in. My parents didn't have enough money for me to come here anyways. So I was like, this will be a 4-year rejection journey. And Jules Engel, the head of experimental animation program, back then, I remember not as much as I love character animation. There were 3 students that had come to experimental that I really admired. And it was Steve Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob, Henry Selick, who directed Nightmare Before Christmas, and Peter Chung, who did Ian Flux. So that was my trinity. I was like, I want to be like them. And I just didn't draw. Back then, character was very much 90s Disney. And as much as I admired all those movies, that wasn't what I wanted to do. So he looked at my figure drawings, completely unimpressed. He was like, what's wrong with these women? Like, he literally threw them away. And then he went through my drawings of Mickey Mouse, Bart Simpson, and Bugs Bunny, and he just tore me a new one. Right? It was experimental, so he said, this is garbage. The word, he's Hungarian, so he had a thick accent. He goes, this is shit. Like, he like made the word like sound, and then drawing by drawing, he was like, excrement. He just ran out of words, like caca. And by the end, he goes, why? Why do you poop in my eyes with these drawings? So and I'm 17, and I'd never met anybody tell me I was terrible. My whole life I had been told, you know what you're doing. So to hear this guy that looked like Chuck Jones and the way people like acted around them, I could tell he was an important person. And he basically said, you're not good. You don't have a voice. You don't say anything. Not only are you not an animation artist, you're not an artist. A copy machine could have done this. And so he closed my portfolio. Again, I'm 17. He doesn't know. And he said, go figure out something else to do with your life. So that was it. Devastated, I walked away. And then he asked me back. When he opened, I left my painting portfolio by mistake. And he said, hey, sad boy, come back. And he saw my paintings. And one by one, he was like, what is this? And I would tell him the story behind each one. And he started laughing. And they were all crazy Mexican. And the way I painted back then was I would write a story and then do a painting, like if it was the cover of a book. And he said, these are films. Every one of these is a story. I'm going to let you into the school. And I was like, I'm 17, shut up. I'm going to let you into the school, but you have to swear to me that you'll never do that crap you showed me earlier, and that you're going to figure out how to make these paintings move. And if you can do that, you'll be doing something that I haven't seen here. I've seen millions of people do that. I've never seen anybody do this. So for me, my culture at that point was something I had to hide and something I would do on the side, and it turned into the thing that allowed me to get in. Once I started coming to school here, every assignment I would do, like all the teachers were like, all right, we're gonna do a warrior. And they're like, what are you gonna do? Mexican Revolution, the Aztecs? Like, they just knew. Every story assignment, they were like, what part of Mexico will you take me to? So it became my thing. Like, people just expected it from me. And every once in a while, I would try to do other things, and I would do them, but I just wouldn't be as good at it, I thought, because no one was doing it. So it really allowed me to grow. And then I had teachers who told me, you're gonna struggle, because when you graduate, no one's doing this. And then another teacher said, all right, Jorge, you have a choice. You can diversify your talent and get really good at a bunch of things, or you can risk it all and focus on your own voice. And either you'll do really well, or you'll become something that's not a professional animation artist. Those were the choices. And I remember telling my parents, and my father was like, you diversify. And my mother was like, yeah, you don't want to starve. Like, diversify. And I said, no. Like, if I starve, I'm not hurting anybody but me. Right? No one depends on me. So I'll take that chance. And, you know, we're so close to Mexico, right? 2 hours away. So for me, it really became where you're from. And it was the first time I met people from other countries. Because in Tijuana, I honestly did not know people from everywhere. Like, I didn't know I was Mexican until I left Mexico. And you start to see that people bring their countries with them. And their home is in them, and their work is a portal to where they're from. So you never leave, because it's in you, right? The problem becomes, and this happened early, that when you have to explain your culture to people, it becomes clear that it doesn't work. The work should speak for itself, because you're not going to be explaining the culture to people before you show all your stuff. So in classes, I would go, oh, in Mexico, this means this, and this means this, and that's why in my story, this happens and this happens. And the teachers would go, well, that means you're not making it for everybody. That means you're only making it for people that are from where you're from. And that's not your audience. The audience is the world. So you have to figure out, how do you make it universal? And the way to make it universal is emotion, right? If you're telling a story and you can tell me what the story is, and then at the end you go, and by the way, it takes place in Mexico, or it takes place in Taiwan, or it takes place in Italy. The story's not about the culture. The story takes place in the culture.
From your other talks, one thing that really inspired me about your journey was how fearlessly you took so many risks, because you felt that risks, it earns you like the greatest reward, and that you are very fearless about it. And I just wanted to ask a question, like, how do you become a risk taker if it doesn't come naturally to you, if that makes sense?
These questions are so good. So I was a scaredy cat as a kid. Okay. And I was really scared. And I look back, and there were so many things that if I could go back in time, I wish I would have done, but I was too scared. And what happens is, once you take a risk and it pays off, something clicks in you. And it clicked in me, where I went, oh my God, I did this thing and it didn't work and I didn't die. Right? Like nothing happened. Like I got hurt, but so? And like the first time I got enough, I always got bullied as a kid, because I was kind of a dumb, like I always wanted to stand up for the little guy. So I would get in fights a lot and I would get beat up. And once I got beat up and I got over it, I was like, that wasn't so bad. And I remember, you know, the story I tell, that my dad, I came home, you know, black eye, and he goes, all right, Jorge, you know, I have questions for you. The guy you fought, was he bigger than you? And I was like, yeah, he was a year older. And he got a big smile, and he was like, good. And he said, never fight anybody your size, and never, ever fight anybody smaller than you. If you fight people bigger than you, that means you're courageous and you're brave. And that means you're learning. And then he said, why did you get in a fight? I said, oh, because the guy was bullying the brother of the girl that I like. And he got an even bigger smile. And he said, when you fight for the right reason, it doesn't matter if you win. What matters is that you fought. The fight is the reward. I bet you that girl likes you. And he was right? Like that act of chivalry back then made a difference. So what I got from that was, even if you think you're going to get hurt, really think about what's the worst thing that can happen. Rejection, humiliation, all these things, they come and go. They pass. But if you get it and if you succeed, you just powered up. So by the time this is all personal stuff, but by the time I met my wife, I met her at a punk rock concert in Tijuana. And back then I was like, wow, this girl's gonna reject me. But if she rejects me, at least I know I tried. And so when she said yes, I was like, what? And then that gave me confidence to go, oh, well, I should try to do this. And every time it worked, you just start creating this sort of thing that gets growing. And you guys know this in the arts. Confidence is almost more important than talent, because confidence allows you to keep going. And then that balance between arrogance and security is so thin, right? Because you have to be crazy enough to believe you can do it, but honest enough to know how hard it's going to be. And Guillermo del Toro talks about this all the time. He says, artists have to have the heart of poets, but the endurance of boxers. And that's a really complicated dichotomy, because most boxers don't have giant hearts, and most poets don't have the endurance of boxers. So you have to teach yourself the other thing that you're missing. But I do think risk-taking in the arts, if you break things down, again, I'm autistic, so I analyze all this all the time. Anything that's been unique, broke the norms, was a risk, right? Everything that has changed things, someone took a risk. Someone was crazy enough to go, I'm going to do this different than everybody else. SpongeBob, like if you guys break down SpongeBob happened when no one was looking. Steve Hillenburg was a marine biologist who came to CalArts to do a master's in experimental animation. Then he was the art director in Rocco's Modern World, and he wanted to do a show about his experiences as a marine biologist. SpongeBob is about innocence, right? The character of SpongeBob represents the innocence of childhood. Can the innocence of childhood survive in a world of adults? That's basically the theme of SpongeBob. It just happened. They only made, I think, 10 episodes, canceled it, and then back then, Nickelodeon just aired it for 2 years. Repeated over and over, and now it's one of the biggest shows of all time. But that was a risk. So every one of these things that people are like, oh, these giant franchises, they all started as originals, and they all started as a risk. So as an artist, teach yourself that the risk is worth everything. And if you're not taking risks, you're not growing.
Yeah, that's
gotta do it.
Thank you so much for breaking it down. It really helps to understand how to think about this kind of things. Yeah.
And think about all this stuff. I mean, we're artists, but you have to think your way through things.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring up another thing that you've talked about, which was when you got offered a job at Lucasfilm and you turned it down because you didn't think you would be able to get the opportunity to tell stories, which is what you really wanted to do. And I'm curious if that's still advice that you would give now, seeing as the landscape has changed and it's harder to get a job now, and if you think maybe you should just take whatever you can get, or if you still think that holds truth to it.
That's a really good question. So, all right. So go back to the year 2000. I'm an international student. Government gives you a year to find a job. If you don't find the studio to sponsor you, you get literally deported. And I start getting these job offers. And it was Lucasfilm, it was ImageWorks, it was Rhythm and Hues, all these CG studios. And they offered me to be a layout artist, previs, character animation. And back then, I remember going, wait. No show creator and no movie director has ever gone to those fields and eventually made their own thing. And I had friends who were like, are you crazy? Like, you're from Mexico. How are you turning down Lucasfilm? And even my parents, my dad was like, Jorge, this is really dumb. What are you doing? And so as the clock is ticking, and I'm running out of money, and I'm basically like, my parents are going, well, move back to Tijuana, we'll figure something out. But this is crazy that you're turning down these jobs. I remember going out with a friend who said, why don't you prove to them that you can make your own thing by making your own thing? And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, prove to them. Like, make your own show. And I'm like, well, I can't make my own show. And they're like, well, why don't you just make a little short to prove to them that you can do this? And so my thesis film was a CG. It took me 3 years, super sad, Carmelo, about this boy who's a bullfighter who dies. And I remember going, he's right. I have to prove to them that I can do the thing that I want to do. Fuck, I haven't done it. So I took out a loan from my parents, and I remember my dad being like, oh, you don't have any money. What do you mean you need money? I said, I need a computer to make an internet cartoon. And it's more expensive to not have a computer than to have a computer. And he was like, what does that mean? I said, well, I can't make anything without a computer. If you let me have a computer and I make something and I get a job, I'll pay you back and my future will be set. It just sounds crazy when I talk about it now. So I got a pirate version of Flash, which is Adobe Animate now. And after spending 3 years, I made this little internet cartoon called El Macho versus the Mariachis of Doom. I had my wife, or my girlfriend back then, help me with the voices. I had friends who helped me with it. Put it online. It got 20,000 views in one night. Again, this is the year 2000, so it's like 2 million. And immediately people everywhere were like, you're funny. And who did this? And I was like, I did it. And so Sony, I had done an internship there, called me in and I said, who wrote this? I did. Who animated it? I did. Who did the backgrounds? Who did the voices? Who did all of it? And it was like CalArts, right? Like, who does your film? You do. And they said, all right, well, buy 20. And so the lesson I got was, you can't convince people to take a chance on you doing something that you haven't done. So for me, it was, if I can show them that I can make something funny in 3 months and I can get 20,000 views, then they'll pay me to do that. And so that was the big thing, because I learned, honestly, no one takes a chance on you to see if you can do it. They hire you because you've done it. So it's a tough pill to swallow, especially as a foreigner. And so if I wanted to prove to them that I can make my culture funny and accessible to the world, I had to make a short that made my culture funny and accessible to the world.
That was like, wow, deep in thought. On the topic of, like making your culture like accessible to the world. I guess it's like one question and a follow up. How do you become an entertaining, engaging story teller? You know, how do you tell stories that are engaging to the audience?
Whew, it's a really good question. You study the films that you love, and one of the things that I did was there's a lot of movies I love that no one likes. There's no value in that. You have to find the movies that you love that everybody loves, and then like a scientist break down why, right? For me, one of the biggest shocks early was, why are there movies I love in Mexico or Latin America that only people in Mexico and Latin America love, but no one else loves? It's not that there's anything wrong with them, it's just they're not accessible to the planet. So when I started pitching TV shows and movies, I would get hit with that all the time, right? Like, explain to me Day of the Dead. And I would tell them about Day of the Dead, and then I would tell them what the movie was, and they would go, how are you going to explain Day of the Dead to the audience? It's impossible.
Right.
So I went home, I still remember, and I was like, okay, what are my favorite movies from other parts of the world? And I grabbed Amelie, I grabbed Seven Samurai, and I grabbed Spirited Away. Those were the three. And two of those are Japanese, right? One is French. I also grabbed The City of God from Brazil. And I remember rewatching them and going, I love these movies. And these movies could not be more Brazilian, could not be more French, could not be more Japanese. Yet, they were successful all over the world. Why? So when you broke those down, I was like, Kurosawa, Jean-Pierre, all these directors, Miyazaki, they understand where they're from, they understand their countries and their cultures and their histories, but they also understand the West, and they understand America, and they understand film history, and they understand storytelling on a global basis, right? A lot of the Kurosawa movies are basically Shakespeare adaptations. Miyazaki loved Walt Disney. Jean-Pierre loves American movies. I'm that. I am a Mexican-born artist who loves Japan and America and Europe and all these cultures from the world. All right, what's my connection to these things? So when I broke down Seven Samurai and Amelie, just two examples, Seven Samurai is a movie about a dying clan of warriors who sacrifices themselves to save ungrateful farmers from evil bandits. That story could take place in Mexico in the Revolution. It could take place in the U.S. during the War for Independence. It could take place in Europe. It could take place in the future. That's a universal story. And those themes are universal. By the way, it takes place in Japan. Amelie, weirdo girl who gets pleasure from bringing love and joy to others, ultimately is rewarded with love, right? That could take place in Valencia. That could take place in Tijuana. That could take place anywhere. The culture is the canvas. The story is painted on top of the culture. As long as the movie's about something universal and the relationships are universal and the characters are universal, it honestly doesn't matter where it takes place. If you're from there, then you get to infuse it with all that authenticity. The best new show I saw in the last few years was called Reservation Dogs, about native kids in Oklahoma. And I always talk about this as a great example of a show where I watched this show and I felt privileged that I got invited to see a world I had never seen before. But the closer I looked at this, painting of this world that was beautiful and funny and sexy and incredible, the closer you look at this painting, the more you realize, oh, it's a mirror. Like, it's a mirror of all of us. There's fathers and sons and best friends and people who died and people who aren't sure where they're from and people who are having issues with identity and people who are having issues with the history of their parents and their grandparents. That's everybody on the planet. So that's how I treat culture now. So I go, even when I pitch now, Maya and the Three, it's a princess whose brothers die trying to fulfill a prophecy. She goes on this crazy Wizard of Oz journey and ultimately dies to save the world. By the way, it takes place in Mexico. But none of those things I told you are specifically Mexican, right? Book of Life. Artist who dies to prove to the girl he loves and to his family and to his town that being an artist is worth it could take place anywhere. So all these are universal. So that's how I treat culture. The danger I find with culture is when you as an artist feel like you have a responsibility to uphold the culture, because we're not historians and we're not museologists, we're not ambassadors, we don't work for the government, we're artists. Our job is to interpret our version of the culture. I always say, do not let your culture define who you are. You define your culture.
The next question he kind of already answered a little bit,
Yeah.
which was it was gonna ask
2 for 1.
like how accurate and like flexible like do you think it's okay to be like when you're representing a culture in like something that you're making?
I love mythology, I love lore, and I love myths. And what I love about them, with all due respect to all religions and all myth makers, is they're all made up. And so these myths are reflections of the views of those times. Guess what? We're the myth makers. We are the myth makers of today. We are the myth makers of our cultures. And so it's our birthright, our privilege, that we get to tell myths. And how dare we not reflect the views of our times with our myths? Right? If people choose not to have certain types of characters and try to raise certain type of things, that's just as big a bold a choice as anything. So to me, when I looked at, my theory was Mesoamerican mythology. When I read all the Mesoamerican mythology, women were objects of desire, the hag, the victim. I don't live in those times. And so the heroes in my are women. And you guys break that mind, the 3, it's about fucked up dads and daughters fixing the world from irresponsible man-child fathers, which is what I witnessed. But that's what I'm reflecting. So I take great pride in going, oh, you think you know what our culture is? Let me show you. And always subverting expectations.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
Kind of like in a more specific, kind of like writer standpoint, I feel like something that I feel you struggle a lot. I don't know if Erika struggles with it too, but I feel like it's a general, like, international thing. How do you approach humor and like sensitivity differences between like audiences from the States or general audiences, and when it comes to creative humor that maybe works in Mexico, or works in Chile, or works in Italy, but it doesn't really quite work for American humor standards,
Humor is super hard, as you guys know. What's funny in one country is not funny in other countries. And the only humor that's universal is physical comedy, right? That's why the Illumination movies do so well worldwide. That's why the Minions do so well worldwide. It's just, and Bugs Bunny and Tex Avery, all that stuff. Dialogue humor, cultural specific humor, is only good for those specific countries. And I love Mexican humor. Mexican humor is super dirty, double entendres. But I know that if I make something like that, I will not get funding. So I stay away from, unfortunately, I like to spend millions of dollars from other people. And so I have to trick them into letting me do it. And the things I make are so expensive that it can never be dependent on those things.
I see.
So I save that for my own stuff, but I know I can never, I can slip stuff in, but the movie can't, or the short can't, or the TV show can't be dependent on that being the thing that carries it. And that's a tough thing to come to terms with.
And I guess kind of like on the other side of things, what are some of the responsibilities or some process that we have to go through when it comes to bringing, that culture into the movie, but also bringing that movie that was made in the States to, you know, Mexico?
So, so for somebody like me, the issue I have is that a lot of movies made by non-Mexican people have done really well in Mexico about Mexico, right? I love Coco. Coco did really well in Mexico. And so that teaches Hollywood that you don't need people from the country to make the movie. The audience loving that movie tells Hollywood everything. So it's a struggle for someone like me when you go, oh, he's Mexican, so he's too Mexican, right? You're too part of the thing to be able to make it universal. So that's a danger, I feel. The flip side of that is if you make something that is, and you have to come to terms with this, especially as an artist, if you make something that everybody in your country hates, but everybody in the world loves, you're screwed. If you make something that everybody in your country loves, but everybody outside your country hates, you're screwed. You have to figure out how to make something for both. And that's really hard. And I always say food is the best example. My favorite Mexican food, most Americans and people that are not from Mexico wouldn't like. That's not something I would serve to the world. My least favorite food that I've had that's Mexican, that people love, is not my favorite food, but I understand why it's so delicious to others. So I have to figure out how to elevate the thing that is popular to be more authentic. That's my lifelong mission. But I can't pretend that it's like your mom's cooking, right? It will never be as good to anyone as to you, because that's your mother.
Right.
And to tell somebody like, this is the best dish you've ever had, it's like, no, that's because it's your mom's dish.
I like that response.
Okay, yeah, so just more about, you know that now in the animation industry here, like in the US, is starting to outsource their production and stuff. And I have noticed that it's like from the other countries' point of view, for example, Mexico, I have seen that they have been outsourcing art processes to Mexico, and that might be affecting the use, but it's also helping the Latin America industry of animation to grow. So what's your point of view on that, or your opinion about it?
Well, animation has always outsourced, like since the beginning of time. It's usually used to go to Asia, but now it's going to Europe and to Latin America, so it's in India, it's spreading out everywhere. But what's great and crazy about it is we're living in a time where it's the most animation ever produced in the history of the medium, right? Video games, adult animation, movies for kids, movies for adults, TV shows, video game adaptations, like it's never been more. What's also great is you used to have to move to the US. Now you can study animation here, go back to wherever country you came from that you love, and you can work from there for in a studio anywhere in the world. Thanks to COVID, working remotely has become not only normal, but a lot of times they are so happy with their results. Ambitious artists sometimes have 2 or 3 jobs, full-time, remote, and are making a ton of money because the studios don't care. As long as you turn your work in, that's all that matters. So we're living in a really interesting time. The other thing that I think is really unique is that the type of work that's happening now is changing and evolving so fast that you guys coming out of school are getting a much more broad palette of things that you can do. But being a traditional 2D animator, when there's no movies being made, meant there were no jobs in my era. Now you can work for various studios all over the world that are doing 2D. You can basically work anywhere now. So what is great is that you can now compete with everybody. What's awful is that you are not competing with everybody.
Of course. Thank you. And well, now that we're running out of time, is there something that you could share about your future projects, or what's your new goal?
Oh my God.
Yes.
All right, I'll tell, let's see, which ones can I tell you guys about? So I am doing an El Tigre movie for Paramount. We're just starting. I am doing a new Netflix movie that I can't tell you what it is, but it's a very famous Latino superhero. That's all I'll say. I'm also doing my first ever. I had an adult animation pilot at Netflix, and Netflix is letting me take it out, and we're gonna crowdfund it. So it's the first time I do crowdfunding. I'm also doing. Oh man, I can't tell you guys. I'm doing a thing for Disney about wars in space. It's a very famous IP.
Okay.
Wars in the stars.
You didn't say it.
I
Don't know
didn't
what
say
that
it.
is.
I didn't say it.
Yeah.
I
I've never
didn't
heard
say.
of this,
I said nothing.
Yeah.
And then I'm also potentially developing a really famous Mexican cartoon mouse character at Warner Bros.
I know
So
who
those
it is. My dad loves him.
So I'm just working on a ton of stuff. I've never been busier. And, you know, we're in a rough time in our industry, so I'm desperately trying to get these things going so I can start hiring people, because that's how I help.
Yes.
Wow. We are.
But always plant, 5 or 6 projects, because you never know what's going to happen.
Okay, last question.
Last question.
Yes. Your one big advice for current animation students studying at CalArts.
My one piece of advice is, it's not what the school gives you that matters, is what you get out of the school that matters. And what I mean by that is, there's incredible people that come here, and there's horrible people that have come here, and there's people that haven't done anything that came out of here, and there's people, honestly like me, who came here with nothing. And the school gave me everything, but it really is you. You're the person who grabs it. And you're the person who will put the effort. I remember sitting in, I'll give you the example. I remember sitting in, there was no screenwriting class in the animation schools when I was here. So I would go to the directing department and sitting in the screenwriting class. And the teacher would go, Jorge, I can't review your assignments. I know you're doing them and you turn them in, but I can't review them because you're not in class. I can't give you a grade. And I remember telling him, like, you think I'm here for the grade? I'm here for the knowledge. And I'm doing the assignments so I can learn. And he was like, all right, I'll look at your assignments. But that's the best example. And I didn't get a grade, but it didn't matter. He reviewed my scripts, and I learned how to write. So the value of learning, to me, is more important than the grades and the scholarship stuff, is how much are you getting out of the school? And how much are you, because knowledge by itself means nothing. How much are you being able to use that knowledge to make things? And when you make something and you go, it's done, oh my God, I know how to make this. How do I make this again better? That's growth. And I think that's the best advice I can give you guys. Compare yourself every year. Look at your drawing the first day of your time here to the last day of that school year, and look at them and go, fuck, I got better, or fuck, I didn't get better. Those are the only two things. Those are literally, no one gets worse.
Yeah.
But to me, not getting better is worse than getting worse. Because that means you wasted time. And you'll never get time back, right? School's a gun. You only get bullets. And your bullets are gonna be your time. I hate to say this, but your motivation and your fears. And if you can figure out how to gut them all to motivate you, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
But only compete with you.
Oh, yeah.
You'll never lose.
That's great advice.
It's true. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yay!
Oh, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for watching.
CalArts!
CalArts.
Everybody's gonna go work now, right?
Oh, yeah.